Well, you're in the right room. We're fantastic panel we have for you this afternoon, preparing for the future of franchising, changes in the air, very, very topical. And what we kind of wanted to do today, there's two things. First of all, we kind of are laying it out kind of as a story. So we're starting with limited service, making our way into extended stay, into soft brands, into full service, kind of touching on all those different topics that fall within that. So what we really want to do, though, is, and we talked beforehand, is we want to make this very interactive. Now, all these fine gentlemen up here will have great things to say, but we really want to hear from you in the questions that you have, because this is, your panel education for you. So please, if you do have a question, whatever, raise your hand, and I will get to it, because we really want to make this as interactive as possible. So going through, here's our panel, and I'd love to do is let them introduce themselves. We'll start down there with Bruce, and then make our way over.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bruce Ford from Lodging Econometrics, Senior Vice President of Sales. 20-year-old company tracking hotel real estate information all over the world, so I'm hoping to share some pipeline insights for you with kind of current state of the art of what we're doing out there in the industry today, and kind of project some of those things into the future.
I'm Justin Knight.
Is that on?
I think it is here.
Okay.
I'm Justin Knight. I'm the President, Chief Executive Officer for Apple Hospitality. We own 236 hotels, predominantly select service, 100% Marriott or Hilton branded, and spread really all over the country.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Al Patel with Baywood Hotels, President of Baywood Hotels. We are also primarily select service hotel developers, operators. We're in 12 states, about to be 17 states, and we will open our 100th hotel this year, primarily branded with Marriott, of course, Hilton, and some IHG hotels as well.
Thank you, Al. Congratulations, 100 hotels. That's pretty awesome. My name is Liam Brown. I'm the president of our franchising business in North America for Marriott International. And I have a few other bits and pieces as well, but that's primarily my main job, I guess, at the end of the day.
Great. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm David Eisen. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Questex Hospitality Group that operates Hotel Management Magazine, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with in this room. I think it's great. It's a journalist, a brand, an operator, an investor, and a consultant. It's like the start of a joke somehow, walking into a bar. But it's gonna be a good one. Now, I'm going to start here. The topic is really about the future of franchising, how change is in the air. I can't think of anyone better to have in the room than Mr. Brown here with Marriott and all that's going on there. We saw, 6 months ago, the face of the industry changed in one fell swoop. Now, can you give us from the perspective of Marriott acquiring Star, what does that mean for the franchise community? And I'd love to hear from you and hear from all the other ones on the panel about that.
Sure. I think first we should talk about, I guess, what the vision of our CEO, Arne Sorensen, and indeed our chairman, Mr. Marriott, in terms of this deal. Arne's vision for it is that this has to be a great deal for all of our stakeholders, whether it has to be a great deal for the shareholders of Marriott International, it has to be a great deal for our guests in terms of the combined company, it has to be a great deal for our franchisees and owners of legacy Marriott hotels and legacy Starwood hotels. And it has to be a great deal for all of our collective associates in terms of the opportunities that are provided for them to grow and develop their careers. So that's fundamentally, I guess, what the objective of that the merger is. And I think with the scale we have in terms of 30 brands, I think it gives us a tremendous, robust presence in the industry. And if you think about our industry compared to, say, not that it's a good example at the moment, the airline industry or rental car industry, the challenge with all these disintermediaries that we have out there, whether it be Airbnb or OTAs and that, part of it is that we're a fractured business, and I think scale matters. The ability to have that range of brands across the world in terms of being truly a global company, I think brings benefits for all. And it has to bring benefits for all. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, if our franchisees and owners are not doing well by this deal, that's a bad deal for Marriott.
Al, what about you in operating these?
Let me tackle this in a couple of ways. I have somewhat of a different perspective than Liam does on this. For me, it's somewhat concerning. you have fewer options now for us developers, and although we didn't have any Starwood properties, I think it benefits Starwood hotel owners more than it did Marriott hotel owners, for example, at least in my opinion, Liam. You know, you also have things like, you know, Starwood was a competitor of theirs for us in the development, you know, in the space. So, you know, Starwood would be offering $1 million in key money to build one of their hotels. Well, Hilton and Marriott also had to be competitive when it came to those types of incentives and whatnot. So now with one fewer player out there, the most aggressive player, some would even say that is now gone, you know, we're somewhat concerned at what, you know, the options that we have left and, you know, Marriott's ability to price more aggressively in the future, both initial fees and ramp up royalties, and then also for, you know, ongoing fees.
Justin, what about you from the investment standpoint and owning these hotels? How does this impact your business?
I'm going to take a position between the two. So, I mean,
You're like Switzerland, yeah, right?
Yeah, I guess. We're actually excited about it. I mentioned we're exclusively invested in Hilton and Marriott hotels. Roughly 50% of our portfolio is within the Marriott brand family. And we had not, prior to this merger, invested and even really looked seriously at the Starwood Select Service brands. For a variety of reasons, we can talk about that later.
Off the record, right?
Well, on the record, even. But the, you know, what we saw in this was potential. And that potential has yet to be fully realized. There are challenges to realizing and recognizing the potential within Marriott. I think they have a good team working on it. But what we saw was tremendous potential to build an amazing loyalty program, to build a platform that offered options to guests that were appealing, and really an alternative to some of the platforms being advanced or directed towards consumers that are really booking engines. So, you know, an Expedia or something of the sort that really has made a mark in the industry by providing a lot of options, right, to consumers. Marriott's advantage, again, assuming that they execute effectively on this transaction, is that they control not only the booking part, you know, of the transaction, but they have a significant influence over the entire stay, which puts them in a position to be very compelling and create, I think, an industry-changing guest experience from start to finish. Like I said, there's a lot to this transaction that has yet to be put in place. But for us specifically, given our ownership, you know, in Marriott brands and the access that we think we'll have once they've combined the two platforms to this incredibly loyal group of Starwood guests that did not have really significant access within that particular platform to select service product, which is our mainstay, we see as being, you know, potentially advantageous. The fact that, and Liam didn't quote it, but my understanding is there was very little overlap in the two platforms, really says to me that this created something big and new. And you know, to Al's point, you know, we're not ignorant to the fact that it puts Marriott potentially in a different position, but they're still not the only choice. And Hilton has a great platform. Hyatt is developing an exceptional platform, and there are other players in the space that I think will continue to help keep them honest.
Would you consider owning Element and Aloft hotels now that they're under the auspices of Marriott?
We would be much more likely to invest in those hotels now that they're part of the Marriott family. They're being redeveloped somewhat. And we're a part of conversations about how those brands will be positioned within the Marriott family of brands. And depending on how that ends up, I think we would be much more likely to invest in them now than we would have been prior to the merger.
Can I ask you real quick, following up that, Liam, bringing Starwood franchisees under Marriott now, from putting them into their new kind of finance model, which I know that's being implemented now. In the long run, do you think Starwood franchisees will kind of save money in the long run, being now affiliated with Marriott as opposed to Starwood?
Well, that would be the objective. I mean, and I think from a very simple perspective, if you just think of this from a size and scale perspective, our res cost is significantly less than Starwood's, and even their SPG program, our program is significantly less. So in terms of, and back to the 100, we now have 100 million rewards members across both, and Justin is absolutely right. There was very little overlap. It was 11%. We've added 1 million members a month over the last 3 months. So I think it gets to a very compelling customer, a guest value proposition, but also, as just to your point about just the economics of an element or in a loft, once we get one system, which is still a little bit away, in 2018, we will have one backbone in terms of res cost and one rewards program. I think there will be huge benefits to Starwood owners, and that's a lot of like a common question or concern I get is, hey, this is a great deal for Marriott, and it's a great deal for Starwood owners, and we think it's a great deal for guests, but we're not so sure is it a good deal for Marriott legacy owners, to your point. And I think our commitment as a company, and Arnie's commitment, and he's relentless about it, is that it has to be a good deal for all of our stakeholders. And back to Justin's point, my colleagues here on the dais are very good at giving their feedback.
Well, let me ask you. You said you're going to keep all. You said they're going to keep all 30 brands. Bruce, what do you think in the long run? Can they? Is that sustainable?
Well, it certainly created a new platform that's never been done before. But what the Marriott-Starwood merger did in the marketplace was it really kicked a lot of other mergers into high gear. You saw other things happen. You saw Red Lion and Vantage. You saw Accor by Fairmont. You saw other kind of acquisitions kick off, and certainly it's a period of time when that's to be expected. Debt is pretty inexpensive relative to where it has been in the past. If you can get that financing, you can do deals. And I think we're likely to see more merger transactions. But I would say, and agree with Liam, that it does have to be a great deal for everybody. And certainly there's some things to play out. But I believe that Marriott will find the way to do it. And there's no question they're prepared to do that.
Thank you.
So let's run into our first slide of the day. Well, second, actually. So I'm going to let Mr. Ford take this one away.
So in many cases, what we tried to do here was some of these discussion points, okay? And I'm not much to reading slides. We just kind of tried to set the landscape of what is in the marketplace today. So limited service really speaks about mid-scale, economy, and upper mid-scale brands. So anywhere from, Express and Fairfield all the way down to Super 8 and otherwise. And what we're trying to just create some scale here. So there's 2 brands out there that have 2,000 plus locations. Of course, the breakup of Best Western, they would certainly have been that big, but the breakup kind of boiled that down. Then you have 5 brands that have more than 1,000 locations, okay? And today, the new brands that fit into this category of kind of True, Tapestry, and Moxie are definitely coming out different than maybe the Express model as it had been, the Cambria model as it had been. And so we're seeing new platforms, grab and go in the select service, those types of things. And lots of brands are looking to remake themselves, particularly in public space. I think, in the lobby and the great room concept within some of these select service and limited service brands is something that everybody's looking to remake. And it currently comprises about 20% of the pipeline. Which would be roughly 130,000 guest rooms in the new construction pipeline today is, quote, limited service.
Oh, I went too quick. So I wanted, as we know, and developers up here, as the bulk of the present-day franchising is in this limited service sector. Operating costs are lower than most full-service hotels, and the margins are higher, obviously. So as we talk about the future of franchising in this segment, I'd love to hear from you guys. What are the kind of present-day challenges that are being faced, but then what are tomorrow's opportunities? Go with that one.
Get started. I mean, some of the challenge that we're seeing in our development cycles are, we're seeing extremely high construction costs, year-over-year increases, sometimes 15% the last 2-3 years in a row. So we're seeing a lot of our costs are going up significantly on the development side. On the operating side, we're seeing a lot of minimum wage pressures, things like that in a lot of the urban areas we're working with. So, our margins are being compromised at the same time. So it remains to be seen, how we'll deal with that, along with the shortage of talent that we're facing many times with, just finding qualified and talented individuals to man our front desks.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing a lot of the same. If we were to look at the challenges that we have, costs of construction and or renovation for hotels have gone up significantly since we entered the business. And labor really in large part, and we focus a lot niche markets that have unique labor issues. But low employment brings incremental challenges. And with supply growing at the pace it is now, it's the market for good employees who will provide the level of service we want at our hotels is becoming increasingly competitive, which is putting pressure on costs. And there are other areas. Right now you have abnormally low, I think, energy costs, which have helped the margins. You have low interest rates which have benefited us, I think, and in some sense offset some of the increases in costs elsewhere. As we look at the environment, we're mindful of what things could look like, if interest rates were to rise significantly or energy costs were to go up, in addition to kind of the current pressures that we're feeling. Beyond that, it's interesting as we look at new development opportunities, even though it seems that there are an infinite number of brands to choose from, we have preferences, and there are certain brands that we have experience with that have proven to be very successful. And in a lot of the markets we want to be, those brands are taken. And so as we look at new development opportunities, we're competing for land with a lot of other real estate options and real estate developers. We're still looking to put the best brands in the best places. And I think we've been reasonably successful there, but that's those are some of the challenges, ongoing challenges in our business.
Do you find that there's too many brands as an investor, as a developer? Are there too many brands or not enough?
Brands are different than they used to be. So, we get asked a lot by guests and investors that invest in our company about that. And on kind of a side note, we get asked about transparency in the business. And it used to be that people selected brands because there was some kind of a promise inherent in the brand that ensured a certain level of quality in their stay and a certain level of service. And that's certainly true to some extent. But consumers have so much greater access to information than they did before through reviews, through online photos, not just the professional ones that we take and post on the brand websites, but customer photos, which sometimes show us at our best and sometimes in a more challenging position. So I think brands continue to be an important component, and there's certainly a large percentage of our customers that are brand loyal. But we're seeing, for us, the more important thing is becoming, and we think the future will be platform. And our choice to be exclusively with Hilton and Marriott is largely because we feel that those are the strongest platforms in the industry with the most loyal group of consumers. And we find within those larger platforms, individuals pick hotels and or brands based on the purpose of their stay or the specific experience they're wanting in a given market. And having multiple choices under one, brand umbrella, we certainly feel that consumers want.
Well, that's the question. Maybe it's not, is there too many brands? Is there enough differentiation between the brands?
Well, for me, if I could kind of piggyback off what Justin said, for us as developers, from the lens of a developer, we because we only pretty much build Hiltons and Marriotts because investors like Justin want to buy Hiltons and Marriotts exclusively. So for us, typically there were, let's say, 5 or 6 Marriott brands or 5 or 6 Hilton brands that we could build on a certain corner, if you will. And if those brands were already gone, we were kind of, we weren't able to develop on that perhaps, high RevPAR generating corner. But now with the advent of the new brands, we can go into those corners, backfill with the new brands, and still be, palatable for an investor like an Apple REIT to come back and buy our hotel. So it's very, for us, the new brands are something that's kind of,
here's a question.
Feeds our appetite.
Here's a question for you, Liam. Then, are you building new brands for guests or for developers?
Oh well, isn't it both? I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't have a guest who's willing to pay for the experience, you're doomed. It is that virtuous cycle that you talked about. Why do you build brands? How do you pick brands? Well, there's got to be everybody's thinking of a potential exit strategy, whether it's today, 5 years, or what happens down the line. So you pick the brands that drive the greatest value for that piece of real estate. And as long as we have a compelling value proposition for the guest, so that they will pay a premium for that brand, and that brand then you are going to pick and he's going to buy based upon, the fundamental economics of it. And going back to your earlier question about, the environment and we always have the risks of day to day in terms of how's business, right? I mean, and we know this year's going to be a little bit tepid RevPAR, so we'll be under a little bit of pressure from a margin perspective. And I'm very even interested in what my friends might say here too. But if you think about last September when we were doing the budgeting for this year, it was all like, hey, gloom and doom. And then we went to Alice and Donald Trump got elected and everybody was kind of like a little bit more optimistic. And when you dug a little bit deeper, say, why are you more optimistic? Well, there wasn't really a whole lot there. Say, well, why do I feel better? I just feel better. But I think our potential opportunity over the next couple of years is if there is an ability and politics is a big part of what we have to deal with. If there's an ability to get, less regulation, tax reform, NLRB, which goes back to that, there is and continues to be a groundswell of at $15 an hour, and some cities, especially on the West Coast, have been very assertive about doing it. And I get the argument in terms of living wage. I understand the perspective and everything, but at the end of the day, it comes down to, can you build a business, open a business, and operate a business based upon a certain level of compensation? And sometimes I think when you price labor too high, then nobody builds hotels, and the same with construction cost as well too. So those are the kind of headwinds, I guess, we have over the next couple of years. But politically, I think, and AAHOA, I think, does an excellent job in terms of lobbying and front and center about, the value of hospitality and hotels and travel and all that sort of good stuff. And I think collectively, we got to do a better job articulating our message around jobs and value creation that we do in our business relative to hospitality and tourism. And at the same time, we have to be mindful of the concerns of the country around security and ensuring that we keep our country safe and all that entails. But I think you have to be able to do both. We have to have a welcome mat for tourism, for tourists, and we have to at the same time keep the country safe as well.
So we have a hotelier in the White House, so you have to be optimistic, right?
He does own hotels.
He does? Oh yeah. Okay. I thought I just put his name on them. I didn't know he actually owned them.
Well, yeah. Yes.
I would only say, David, that being 20 years in the industry, I can tell you for sure that there are brands out there that are not for me, okay, and that we continue to see the stratification of brands looking to grab that younger traveler, the guy who is completely different from me. His tendencies are different, his needs are different, his wants are different, his lifestyle's different. And so there's going to continue to be a stratification down there, and I wouldn't be stunned if we sat here in 10 years and there were 45 new limited service brands. So I think...
And Bruce, that's happened all the time in the past. I mean, if you think about Courtyard, which was, the hotel for business travelers, designed by business travelers, and the bigger room, and if you just think about it, I mean, the big selling point on that was the 25-foot long cable for the phone, right, and the big desk, and and then when I was a GM at the time, customers would come down and say, "Man, you got to do something about the plugs," because they were reaching under the bed to plug in the laptop because everybody was. So what are all these customers carrying laptops for? But now that's all changed, right? That you now have your mobile device. So guess what? The millennial wants to be downstairs in the lobby having a nice crafted cocktail, and he's like texting his friends and saying, "Yeah, I'm just having a very nice bourbon, whatever, and life is good." So we got to be very mindful of where are our guests going and what do they want. They want that rooftop bar and the $15 cocktail and.
Yeah, you guys want the $15 cocktail, right? As consumers there in the front row. Oh wait,
it's no good if it's not $15.
Premium. Informal poll then from all the franchisees out there. Are there too many brands? Are they well differentiated?
This gentleman says there's
He's
too
shaking his
many
head.
and they're not well differentiated.
Personal opinion, I think the Marriott Starwood merger, if the franchisee of Starwood going to Marriott, you got, from the select service where you got a loft, Element, Residence Inn, there's also the lot, Springville, Toyota, Town Place, Fairfield. So at what point, as a now combined company, we say X is different than Y, is competing for the same sort of business? Aren't you be competing as a loft against a Courtyard, Fairfield, Town Place, Springville, all within 5 or 6 miles? That's a lot of different, brands to competing with. So how do I differentiate myself specifically from my brand versus the next guy next to me?
I think that's
It's a great question. I mean, the fundamental premise is what is the logic around development and growth? But at the end of the day, companies like Marriott and Hilton, I mean, you have an implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing with your franchisees, and there has to be, it's not unbridled development growth at the expense of everybody else. The key question is, what will it take to build out a particular market and ensure that everybody thrives? Now, that might seem very Pollyannish to be able to say that, but at the end of the day, if we destroy the economics of the business, as you would say that it's just a, hey, nobody's going to make any money, that's not a long-term recipe for success for us either. I mean, our franchisees and owners have to be able to make money, and it behooves us to make sure that we have a balanced approach to growth and development that doesn't destroy the economics of guys who exist in that particular market. Now, do we have issues? Of course we do. Do we have rub points? Of course we do. And I'm often in the position where I'm denying a guy a deal, and not that we're in the business of denying deals, but we do deny deals. But I'm in the, where we say, no, we can't do that deal. And the guy says, no, it's a great deal. It's going to do really well. But hey, I got to be mindful of the guy who's in the marketplace. And sometimes you're in a room with developers say, hey, deny everybody else, but my deals are great, right? Because we all collectively want to grow our businesses. So it is a matter of, what is the fundamental strategy around how we execute around growth and development, and how do we make sure that everybody wins? It's got to be a win-win, because if we destroy the economics of our community of owners and franchisees, then we have in essence destroyed ourselves.
Yeah, the onus really is on the brands, and again, speaking to the parent brands, to grow the platform faster than they grow the portfolio.
Correct.
And to the extent they do that, everybody wins, right? It's when they get those two backwards and they grow the portfolio faster than they grow the platform, meaning that they put more product into the portfolio than they have guests on the other side. That's when the balance goes wrong. Absent that though, more brands means more choices for us as developers and for consumers, and more entry points into a market. The trick really for Marriott, and when I mentioned earlier that there were still things that needed to happen in the merger in order for it to be successful for all of us. The trick for Marriott in this merger, and for Hilton and Hyatt and the other brands as they try to compete, is to find ways to drive more business through their main pipe. And to the extent they're doing that, there's room for them to expand their portfolio of hotels and portfolio of brands, and for us individually in markets to continue to be successful.
I mean, isn't kind of the rub, though, that, for Marriott's stock price to do better, it's based on net unit additions, right? So adding more hotels, right, into the, location. Yes, but then also it's such that.
But it's same store sales as well, right?
Yeah.
So the economics of the system that we have today has to be good. And the key thing is to have a balanced growth and the ability to drive value to those hotels. So you open your hotel, hey, 60% of your paid room nights are going to be Marriott Rewards customers. That has to be, the objective has to be to continue to push the envelope on that. So that, hey, you open the place and bang, life is good.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I can, to your concern earlier, I can tell you that, immediately pre-merger and post-merger, Marriott has told me no more times than they've told me yes on certain deals. And they're very mindful of, let's say there's an element already under construction, I can't give you residence in right now because I'm worried about, I need to let that franchisee ramp up. So, from my perspective, from my lens, Marriott's one of the ones that are the better one, the good guys out there.
Is there a different set of AOP rules then, now that this merger, with this merger?
I mean, our development philosophy is the same as it was before. We are actually only one of, I don't think any of our competitors do it in any more of a robust way than we do, but we notify everybody within a 5-mile radius of any brand that's coming in. We have a process called our Growth Administration Committee where we discuss and we do an internal analysis of what the potential impact is. And our owners and franchisees in that market have the right to write a letter, send in a check. We do an outside study, and we look at on balance to say what is it within our ability to approve this deal, or is it not?
Well, let me ask you this. I spoke to many franchisees yesterday, and we were talking about supply and demand, which obviously regulates about the industry. So let me ask you, is it worrisome now that in 17 we're going to see a shift where supply growth will outpace demand growth on a year-over-year basis for the first time in a long time? Is there worry there? I know they were saying that is actually a concern, and obviously the hotel
Wouldn't
business
lock
is
that
corner by
in
corner.
yet.
Say that again?
I wouldn't lock that in.
You wouldn't lock that in? Okay.
No.
That's what the predictors, that's what the...
Yeah, it's going to be close. They're going to be kissing cousins for a little while. There's no question about that. I mean, supply growth is still pretty muted. I mean, we're talking 2.3, 2.4% is likely where we're going to land this year, and demand growth has been running over 3 nationally for several years. And so the expectation is, yeah, some international arrivals, people are kind of looking at that saying, is that really going to quelch demand? But I think, from a business travel standpoint, a lot of companies feel a little bit better as a result of the new president, and therefore they are allowing and spending on business travel. So continues to be robust. So I don't think supply, when we had the last supply concerns, you were talking about supply growth at 4, and you were talking about demand growth at 2 for a couple of years. And we're not anywhere near that yet. But there are some markets where there is new supply. New York has seen 21% more hotel rooms today than they did 5 years ago. So there are some markets where that is a problem, okay? But it's not everywhere, and it's not broadly across the whole country.
And then the other issue you have is some stealth supply. So in New York City, you have a lot of Airbnb, and that presents a challenge, I think, in terms of our business. And at the end of the day, hey, we're all, we believe in capitalism, we believe in competition, but we like competition to be on the same level playing field. Our owners and franchisees and ourselves were held to a high standard in terms of fire, life, safety, and Americans with Disabilities Act and all that sort of good stuff, and to have people who are flogging apartments with, all sorts of issues around it, it's a little bit strange.
I actually think RevPAR in New York, using an example there, may have been permanently stunted at least a little bit because the change in the supply mix has been so great. There's so much more select service, mid-scale, upper mid-scale available in New York. A Hampton Inn's the new $300 a night room in Manhattan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's changed forever.
Yeah.
So the full-service hotels are challenged to really create a better product, to be more renovated, to say, I'll spend $75 a night more to stay at the Marriott Marquis versus the Courtyard across the street.
New York is a conundrum, no doubt about it, because I think, one of the theories, but you still have a market that runs mid-80s occupancy and you can't drive rate. And you say, why is that? And I think it's because as the rate comes down, there's a great appetite to go to New York. So people who, hey, it's $400 a night to go stay in New York, I'm not going to go there. But if it's $200, they're in.
Infinite demand.
Yeah, so but it's demand at the wrong price point, unfortunately, so.
By the way, it took 48 minutes before the Airbnb word came up, so I think that's a record in one of these. In one of these panels. Is it beyond that for Airbnb? I mean, we talked about regulation, but what is the impact of Airbnb? Can you talk to Al on that and your hotels?
Sure, yeah.
What's the effect?
We're somewhat concerned. We typically have been, let's say close-in suburban type developers, and we've had quite a lot of urban developments as of late, and we're seeing quite a bit of headwinds from Airbnb, especially where there's a big multifamily influx coming in. We're concerned about going into those markets here in the next 12 to 18 months till we figure out, how quickly that multifamily demand can kind of be absorbed and that supply can be absorbed. So we're quite concerned. We're looking at urban development from a different perspective right now, especially in markets where you have those high multifamily supply coming in and perhaps the demand not there to meet it all.
Anybody else want to tackle the Airbnb conundrum?
I mean, we're a little unique just given the makeup of our portfolio. It has yet to be a significant factor for us outside of, you know, abnormally high rate events. You know, so if the Super Bowl was coming into a market, you know, we may not be able to drive rates the same way we would, or you know, a marathon or something of the sort. But you know, given the bulk of our portfolio is suburban, we have limited urban, and even in the high density suburban markets, it's not as big a factor. If you look at where the bulk of Airbnb supply is, it's really centered around a finite number of markets, and it has impact in those markets. It's difficult to quantify because it's not permanent supply, and that's the interesting piece there. You know, the other thing that we found is, you know, our average RevPAR for our portfolio is lower than a lot of our peers, and the value proposition is just different. You know, Airbnb is attractive for certain types of guests on certain stays, but really it's most attractive in markets like New York because it's available at a significantly lower price point. And you know, with our RevPAR, you know, just north of $100, you know, we're still providing a significantly greater value proposition to guests in the market that they might get, you know, staying in an apartment or in somebody's guest bedroom. You know, depending on how that develops over time, there might be more impact in the future. But for us, at least, we still see Airbnb as a limited scope competitor.
Bruce, I had a question for you, and I'm going to throw out some numbers now, so you'll have to forgive me. I have to look at my paper. But according to Lodging Econometrics Global Construction Pipeline Trend Report, the world's hotel pipeline had 11,776 hotels with almost 2 million rooms at the end of 2016. Does that sound about right, first of all?
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm on the right track.
You're in the window there.
What is the breakout then, or build out in this space, when concentrating on mid-scale and upper mid-scale, and some of the brands that are also not represented here on the stage?
Yeah, to give you the upper mid-scale and mid-scale totals, I had actually misspoke a little while ago about that being 20% of the pipeline. It's actually 51% of the pipeline are in those two chain scales of mid-scale and upper mid-scale. When you look broadly across the world, the number diminishes a little bit because there's a little bit more upscale focus in a lot of areas, particularly in Europe and particularly in Asia. Those upscale brands have a little bit more of an impact, and we treat them a little bit differently. But if you clustered the whole thing together and you said mid-scale, upper mid-scale, and upscale, in the U.S., that's 71% of the rooms in the new construction pipeline. It's pretty vast. And we're going to continue to grow in that space because these hotels are efficient buildings with efficient operations. And we're even seeing some of that dual branding happening, or tri-branding happening, or campusing. We're tracking 430 projects that have that dynamic in the United States today, and where you're getting an extended stay paired together with a select service hotel, which I think is a tremendous dynamic if you're a guest because you got more room types to deal with. And I think also for the hotelier, it's a good combination of synergies from a cost perspective.
You know, I wanted to also talk about this idea of price tiering, specifically creating brands that ostensibly take the place of another brand because it's kind of got pushed up the chain scale or the rate scale, so to speak. When we, you know, the True brand came out from Hilton kind of to take that place of Hampton that had the rate kind of got pushed up to where it was, I guess, an upper mid-scale brand, but it's almost pricing in the upscale kind of tier. Are we going to see more of that? Is that a consideration as when companies are launching new brands, kind of that whole pushing price tiering and moving up, what we saw with like True and Hampton? I know we talked about that, Bruce.
Well, there's no question that when you talk about Marriott with 30 brands, I mean, they'd probably find a way to fit those 30 brands into a price scale that's about this tall, okay? And there are, and it's still market-driven to an extent, okay? But the price tiering that we're seeing today is really, in the upper mid-scale is where the dynamics really start to happen because there's certainly, that is starting to stratify a little bit, because there's a few brands that are kind of in the top 10% of pricing in upper mid-scale, moving towards upscale. And it kind of leads us to look at and say, that chain scale on its own is going to be 1 million guest rooms by the middle of next year. And it only is 10 years old. So the thinking is that there's probably some break apart there at some point in the near future, so that we can get a little bit more stratification in terms of classifying them a little bit better and putting the comp sets together a little bit better, because certainly there are some brands that are 10, 15% higher in terms of rate than the others.
You know, an interesting thing's happened over the past decade in that the upscale brands have in many instances taken the place of upper upscale brands. You know, they're serving the same purpose and doing a better job. If you look at what's happened to suburban full-service hotels or you know, upper upscale hotels in suburban areas, and even now in New York, you know, with what you mentioned earlier, with you know, upscale hotels being developed in mass quantities there, they're newer, generally speaking. They're nicer, and the value proposition for guests is more attractive. And I think what we've seen over the past decade and a half is an evolution of a number of these brands and consumer preferences. You know, we talked about, or you talked earlier about supply growth being, you know, nearly entirely concentrated around a particular segment of the industry, this you know, upper quality select service segment. That's followed a demand spike for that same type of product. And you know, as we look at the landscape, I think one of the interesting things to track over the near term will be, you know, what happens to the traditional full-service hotel. Because certainly there's a place for convention hotels. I think there's a place for luxury. There's increasingly a place for experiential high-end hotels. And, you know, Marriott's done a great job with Autograph and the launch of that brand. But the old box full-service hotels, you know, in suburban or lower density markets, or even in higher density markets that have seen significant supply growth, in the select service space, just aren't doing as well. And what you're seeing is, in a lot of these markets, the type of product that we're attracted to, which can be run much more efficiently, is now commanding the rates that those hotels used to command in those markets. And the margins and returns on them are incredibly attractive, which will continue to drive further development in that space and you know, push out, I think, the assets that are less quality. Now that makes room as those hotels move up kind of the scale. It's made room for brands like True. And you know, it'll be interesting, Marriott has a few brands that they're positioning in that space as well, you know, which are a lower price point, kind of an entry brand within the broader brand family. And you know, we think that's appropriate. That space is going to continue to grow and develop in the near term, and we think there's a piece of the puzzle that's just above the upscale in the lower end, upper upscale, that's going to feel the most pressure over the next little bit.
I want to quickly touch on, and we're getting to the end of the part of limited service, but lending in this space. What are we seeing here in terms of debt for new builds, for acquisitions? Maybe, you know, Al, as a developer, you could touch on that and what the lending environment looks like?
You know, we're definitely seeing some headwinds as of late, the last, let's say, 6 months or so. I mean, typically we were financing our development projects, recourse to our guarantors of 75 to 80% loan to cost, and we've definitely seen that come back to around 65 to 70 now, all in the past few months. And that's even if we're able to get a loan because of our size and scope and our net worth that we're guarantees, you know, are covering. But you know, we're seeing definitely a lot of difficulty over the last 6 months or so. Yeah. And many times it's the lenders are telling us we would like to work with you, but our buckets are full of hospitality. So they've done so much hospitality in, you know, 13, 14, 15 that they're not unable to continue to do that, because that seems to be what the demand is out there.
Are you seeing maybe, you know, smaller regional banks taking the place of the larger?
That's typically what we like, those types of banks. Perhaps, you know, the bank that has 30, 40 branches, something like that. Those are the types of lenders that we like to go with, because it provides us a little bit more flexibility, local knowledge, things like that. So those are typically the banks that we try to target in the first place.
Liam, can you talk about that from the?
I would echo what Al said. I mean, I think the community in general, their feedback over the last few months has been that lending is tightening. One line I got was that bankers rarely ever say no. They just make it hard for you to say yes, right, in terms of how what they might put on the table in terms of loan. Yeah, but there's a lot of them say the same thing Al just said, that loan to cost is more like 60, even a little bit lower in some cases, which makes it hard for a deal to pencil. And then coupled with construction costs in many, many markets, it makes it harder to get the deal done.
Yeah, I may also say that I think that the 2 Fed funds rate hikes over the past 4 months actually may provide some momentum in the industry to see lending turn around a little bit. The banks want to see their spreads get better. And obviously, we're in a situation where we have an enormously profitable industry that still has a couple more years of a real estate upcycle, or at least a softening that isn't a recession. So I actually think that we'll be sitting here in 6 months and we'll be saying lending has loosened a little bit. It's my expectation.
Yeah. I want to ask a question about revenue management and rate pricing. Obviously, they're so vital to profitability, but I think it's a good question to be asked is, what's the difference in pricing when we compare a limited service Hampton to like an extended stay home to, or a 4 Points to a town place? What are the differences there when we talk about pricing? And
I mean, what we're seeing is, sometimes our residence inns have a higher RevPAR than the full-service Marriott we're competing with. So,
yeah, that's.
I mean, there's been a lot of, it's market-specific, but generally speaking, the home twos, we've developed quite a bit of home twos over the past several years. But, those are the brands that, sometimes there's no difference between the Hamptons, and many markets, we own a Hampton and the home two in the market. And we're seeing the home two probably drive, somewhat similar RevPARs, where the home two with the extended stay component generating typically a slightly higher occupancy than the Hampton was, and slightly lower rate, but similar RevPARs.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we're seeing some of the same things. When I mentioned earlier that there were a number of factors playing the industry, and transparency was one of the important ones. With increased transparency, quality of the asset, location, quality of the guest experience that people have had there are all playing into the value proposition for guests. And quality hotels in a good location that are incredibly well run, and that get those good stories told about them, run higher occupancy and are able to charge higher rates. The variance in quality between a home two and a Hampton, just if you go with a prototypical asset, isn't huge.
Right.
And so, but the design is distinct, and so you start, pricing is more a matter of taste and preference than it is, the quality of the product. And you can easily have a brand that's intended to be priced lower than another, in a position where it can be charging higher rates. That happens all the time. Yeah.
I was saying from a consumer standpoint, sometimes I think I'd rather stay at a brand new Courtyard than sometimes a 15-year-old JW. It's just when new product comes in, you're like, that's where usually I typically want to stay.
And I think to Justin's point, that information is already available to the guest. They get on, they look around, pricing, pictures, TripAdvisor. I always think one of the best things, Wells Fargo did this study that showed that, that hotels that had a high TripAdvisor rating got higher rates. Because when I'd be talking to owners and franchisees about the importance of investing in the asset and everything, they say, well, I can't take guest satisfaction to the bank. Well, apparently you can. So that was a really good, and I think it's part and parcel of the world that we live in, right? This free availability of data, opinions, and there's good about it and there's bad about it, as was seen yesterday or the day before with that United episode. So, things like that can destroy your brand overnight, but positive, great stories can really lift a hotel and lift that rate capability in a particular market.
Yeah, what happens when Mary has to walk a guest? It's not anything like we saw in United, right?
No. Yeah.
No comment?
We're very nice about it. I actually have been walked a few times from a Marriott hotel.
Did you get pulled out?
Yeah, I
Like on the ground like that?
No, I didn't get, no.
Okay. That's good.
No, I had to say, no, you can't give me the $100 because I'm a Marriott employee.
Oh, you couldn't even take the money?
No.
Oh, man.
No, that'd be bad form.
Right. You know, we said before we wanted to make this as interactive as possible. Are there any questions from the audience? You have anything? I'll let you think about it, and then you can ask one. Before I go, F&B has changed a lot in this segment as well. Can you maybe touch on that and how the evolution in F&B has changed in limited service and select service?
Well, we've certainly seen the evidence with the grab-and-go markets or areas created within the upscale space, and it's starting to creep down into the upper mid-scale space where you have some fast food options, microwavable type things available, some prepackaged sandwiches. I actually expect that that will continue to grow and thrive, and you're even seeing it more now in the extended stay option where you're almost getting a little market within the hotel that largely can offer, we're not going to call it restaurant quality food, that would be overselling it, but offer you some quick options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, if you just, the environment is a tough environment to compete from a food and beverage perspective. If you think about the range of choices that consumers have today, you're visiting Boston or New York or anywhere, and you say, well, you know what, there's usually some great local place with a local person who has put his heart and soul into the operation, and I'm in Memphis and I want to have the best barbecue, or where, you know, Boston, I want the best New England chowder, or I want to go to the North End. What are we actually competing? What are we actually trying to provide? And it goes back to, okay, it's the guy who arrives at, 9 or 10 o'clock at night, or just wants a quick bite, and then the other piece, it's really about the beverage and the bar and the experience. I can have a couple of drinks before I go out to that nice place in the North End or that great barbecue spot or whatever. And the challenge then is always the economics of it, right? How do you deliver something that at the end of the day is not, costing you an arm and a leg, and maybe you make a little bit of money on it? I mean, the challenge for, say, New York is you could be doing $3 or $4 million a year in F&B and actually losing money in some of our hotels, So and if you think just the changing demographics from millennials and whatever, what do they want? They want a cool bar experience, and I might have been making a little bit of a joke about the $15 cocktail and that kind of thing, but they do. They want something interesting, but they're not going to spend the whole night there drinking and eating. They're not. It's a 10, 15, 20-minute, 30-minute visit with friends, and then, hey, let's Uber over to, that cool, hip local restaurant.
55 minutes in, he brings up millennials and Uber in the same sense. So congratulations on that.
I really think that the F&B is going to be something of the wayside. Even that acronym, I think it's going to become more BNF, as Liam mentioned earlier. These rooftop bars. So where does BNF really work? It's where the bar scene is very unique. Mm-hmm. You have some type of a rooftop component, which is very popular now. You've got people that want to be alone yet still with people. So those are the kinds of things that, you've seen, full-service Marriotts be completely transformed, where they're, the Shula's was in the corner of the restaurant. Now that's all been blown out. Yeah. It's all wide open, and there's community tables, a plethora of community tables that it's more bar-centric. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's what we're seeing is an inverse relationship where it's F&B is turned into BNF. Yeah.
Does that factor in when you're buying a hotel, F&B?
Sometimes, our hotels have limited F&B, but to the point earlier, we shouldn't forget that the BNF or the switching kind of the beverage and the food applies not only to the evening, but to the morning as well. You look at how well Starbucks has done, right? Yeah. Starbucks is a beverage company that sells some high quality, but select number of food products. And I think as we look at what consumers want on a go-forward basis, it's going to be something very different than, what we've tried to provide them in the past. And these companies have found a way, Starbucks, whether it's Starbucks or the really cool hip bar down the street, they found a way to provide consumers with what they want in a format that's very profitable, right? That's a win-win. And I think what we're seeing now is hotels follow suit and adjust their models in ways that provide the best value to consumers and remain profitable to them. You know, like I said, food and beverage is a small piece of our total business.
Yeah.
You know, a significant portion of our hotels give away breakfast and have very little evening business.
But it should be a big contributor to the brand experience.
It should be a significant part of the brand experience and part of the value proposition that's translated into higher rates for the hotels.
Bruce, you're from New England. I thought you were a Dunkin' Donuts guy.
Well, it was what was available. Sometimes you're subjected to that. But I think the interesting aspect of the bar business in the upscale hotels, I've seen a lot of Hilton Garden Inns, and I'll use that as an example, built in city centers, where it's to be seen and to see at the same time. So the things out on the street, it's the best windows in the front of the hotel, that's where the bar is. And people want to be seen on the walk by, the drive by. It's the same thing with rooftop experiences. If it's to be seen and to see, it creates that experience, and you can actually sell a few drinks doing that, so, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, with that, let's segue quickly into extended stay. Bruce, you want to jump on this slide real quick, and then we'll ask a couple questions?
Sure. So there's generally considered to be 25 extended stay brands. It's not, quote, a chain scale, but it's often something that people monitor. It is, we have extended stay brands that are both in the economy chain scale, in the upper mid-scale chain scale, and then in the upscale chain scale. Lower tier being extended stay America kind of products. You have the Home 2 and the Candlewood and the Staybridge in the middle, and then you have Residence Inn and Homewood in the upper tier, if you will, Hyatt House up there too. So in this quote area, there's a couple dynamics that are happening. First of all, 20% of the pipeline is in this chain scale. It's not a unique number. That's a little bit overlapping, obviously, because you have these brands sit in their own chain scale, but about 125,000 rooms and 25 brands. This is also significantly impacted on the dual brand side. There would be about 15,000 of those 125,000 rooms are in a dual brand model where they're being built with something else, where you're seeing anywhere between 80 and 100 keys put together with an 80 to 100 key limited service product, which is a popular idea today. And when extended stay started with Residence Inn, and I'm sure Liam would remember this, when it's Residence Inn, it was designed to be stay a week.
A day, a week, a month.
Yeah. And today, I think extended stay hotels, albeit they have a little bit of a longer stay than a traditional select service hotel, still really under 3 days, if I got it correct.
Yeah.
Like 2.7 or something like that. So really what you're trying to do in the extended stay model is you're offering separate eating, living, and sleeping quarters within there. And one of the things you get in an extended stay, obviously, if you have children, that's a very popular mode for the family to travel. It's a little bit more appealing. You get 2 televisions in the room. One can go on Disney and the other can go on the sports channel if otherwise. But so family travel tends to gravitate towards extended stay. But also, I think, as a business traveler, I enjoy it because you've got a little bit more room to spread out, you know, if you're going to be there for a few days. And urban extended stay really does offer some of the larger platform rooms available in a given city at a pretty reasonable rate. So there's all kinds of appeal around that. And so extended stay is not going away. And we've certainly had a few new brands over the past couple of years, but I expect a few more.
What do you guys think? What's the opportunity for the space for the future?
I mean, it's huge. If you look at anybody who tracks extended stay demand separately, you know, it's still underserved by, you know, dedicated product. You know, the challenge now, and you mentioned earlier that you know, the length of stay has come down for extended stay product. The challenge in part is that it's so universally attractive that we as owners and management companies are pushing out a portion of the extended stay guests in order to put in higher rate transient rate, right? So, but the extended stay product appeals to a broad range of customers and has the flexibility to drive incredibly high margins. So, you know, I mentioned in the beginning we're attracted to select service product, generally speaking, because their high margins and relative stability. You know, that's taken to a whole new level in the extended stay model, right, which is a subset of the select service space. Because you have guests that stay for an extended period of time, the cost to service those guests, to maintain those rooms is significantly lower, and all that contributes to margins that are wonderful. The other piece of that is that because guests are staying for a more extended period of time, you tend to get higher occupancy on shoulder nights. So, you know, the nights that typically don't see higher occupancy, and so you're getting better utilization of your hotel overall. You know, at one point we only owned, you know, extended stay hotels, Homewood Suites and Residence Inn, and they still represent a significant portion of our total portfolio. We think they're incredibly attractive, and you mentioned earlier the fact that a lot of the extended stay hotels are being paired with a quality select service, you know, upscale product, and we found that to be you know, a killer combination as we approach a market, offering the best variety and optionality, both from an operational standpoint and marketing standpoint to consumers within a market.
Al, you said you own some home twos.
Yeah,
So
we own quite a bit of them, and you know, one of the reasons what we saw the last Great Recession, if you will, was you know, to Justin's the counterpoint to Justin's point is we can really push transient and ADR in the up cycle. Is in the down cycle we can really sell extended stay, and it really kind of levels off kind of occupancy and, you know, provides us with some cushion. And you know, in the last recession, for example, our extended stay hotels vastly outperformed our transient hotels because, you know, people have the ability to, if you're a Marriott Rewards member, you can still go to a Residence Inn, still get a great stay, and still get your points, and you're not putting, you know, JW Marriott on your expense report. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, unique benefits to owning extended stay. We love them. You know, we'd like a majority. Right now, we're probably trending about 50, 60, 40. Extended stay being a heavier portion of our development pipeline, and we'd like to see that even go up to 70, 30.
I love Residence Inn. I used to be a general manager of a Residence Inn and a regional for Residence Inn. And it's interesting how the business have changed. To Bruce's point about the mix of business, I mean, we still have around 47% of our business is extended stay when you look at the macro numbers. And yes, it's more transient than it used to be in the past. But I was the general manager of the Residence Inn in Tewkesbury in 1995. And I arrived at that hotel, and it was middle of May. And I came from Courtyard, which was, you know, hey, 100 in, 100 out kind of thing every day. And I said to the front desk associate, I said, you know, so many check-ins do we have? 4. And I said, oh my God, how many rooms do we have still? She said, don't worry. We've got 3 rooms left, so I have 1 person to walk. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a great business model. I mean, the business at the time was project work, relocation, training, temporary assignment. And you got to know your customers really well, and maybe sometimes a little bit too well. We had a lady there who was building a house, and the builder went bankrupt, and I had to endure the whole conversation every day about how bad things were. But the business has certainly grown over the years, and even gotten more in terms of, it used to be never a belief that you could be in urban areas, you know, so, I'm not sure that it would work. But I think it has been demonstrated that as a business model, it works remarkably well. And the common themes around it are it's a very clearly defined business, a very clearly defined brand, and from a margin perspective and a cost of operating and a simplicity of operating, they're, you know, one of the best to do. So it's a great business.
Are there challenges to operating an extended stay hotel versus another type of hotel product?
You know, some of the challenges where Leah mentioned, you have guests staying in your room for long periods of time, you know, but
they can make a mess.
They can make a mess, and, you know, cooking a lot, and, you know, smells and things like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, we run a Home 2 Suites in a Hampton in the same exact market with similar RevPAR, like I mentioned earlier. The Home 2 Suites runs 4 percentage points higher on operating
than
margins.
the Hampton.
Yeah, so that's just an example of one of the benefits of that.
You know, we talked about tiering. Can you go through the differences between a Home 2 versus a Homewood, and a Residence versus a Town Place and an Element? I mean, there are so many brands out there and brands within the same type of product. What are the real kind of differences or inflection points between them all?
Who wants to take that one?
You gotta take
I got to take that one. Well, I mean, I think some of it is pricing, product and service, the level of fit and finish. So the Town Place Suites room is, the Town Place is positioned below Residence Inn. It's a smaller room, and one could argue a little less sophisticated finish than a Residence Inn. Element, we think, has a place to play. There's only 15 of them open, but a lifestyle extended stay brand that should perhaps command a premium over Residence Inn. So we got to continue to work through that in terms of the economics of the cost to build, and what is the bundle of product and services that we offer within that hotel that will enable us to command a premium. And then the other piece was.
No, I think you about got it.
Well, and I think Homewood and Home 2 are kind of similar in terms of how they're positioned. It's space, and the square footage of one is bigger than the other, and level of fit and finish is a little bit different.
Certainly the economy extended stay is a bit different probably, and kind of goes down to, you know, that extended stay America that's at really less than a traditional economy transient hotel. I mean, in some cases you have really 30-day stays where the guy checks out on day 29 and checks back in on day 30.
Yeah.
And, you know, so you have a lot of that dynamic. So the economy extended stay, certainly, you know, in-town suites, suburban lodge, you're talking extended stay America. Woodspring, obviously, is one of those, where you just really, at that temporary employee, temporary assignment kind of thing, their stays are truly longer.
Yeah.
And from a revenue management standpoint, they actually, their rates are on a weekly basis as opposed to daily, some of those. Does that not work on other brands, though? I mean, if you, going down the chain scale, is it better to price on a weekly basis as opposed to daily?
It's always better to price daily because you can change it daily.
That's right.
But I know, like Woodspring, I think, or My Place, they charge.
I've never played around with it.
It's why Harry Helmsley
to kind of see if I said I'm going to stay 3 days at this Residence Inn versus 8 days, does the price change?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never really played around with it, but as an operator, I'm sure that it does.
It's always why Harry Helmsley said, why did he get his fellow real estate guys in New York asked him, why'd you get into the hotel business? He says, because you can price it daily. It's great.
Dynamic pricing.
Has its downside too. But,
right. What about, how do lenders view the space?
Extended stay? I mean, I think it's changed a lot. It used to be they were, you know, kind of don't really understand it. Is it, you know, kind of housing or whatever? But no, very well regarded today, I would say. No. Very well regarded, especially the premium brands.
I think so as well.
Hilton and Marriott.
Yeah,
and Staybridge.
No, Hilton and Marriott.
Yeah.
Any brand within the Hilton and Marriott brand family, you can sell to a lender. And I don't know about Element and a Loft as new additions, but we haven't had any problem. And the developers who have built for us haven't had a problem getting financing for the extended stay brands versus the regular select service.
For us, our pitch is very simple to lenders. You know, typically Hilton Honors, Marriott Rewards delivers between 55 and 65% of our business. Well, we break even between 55 and 57% occupancy. So it's pretty compelling that the worst we can do is break even. Right. As long as we turn on the sign, we're going to break even. So if we take a call, somebody walks in, that's just, you know, profit for us as gravy. So, you know, it's a very compelling, compelling case for us to take to lenders on these things. And, you know, again, being part of the Hilton and Marriott brand of families, and as well as the other brands also, it's as long as the brand's in place, you know, the lenders are there to finance you.
Justin, also just picking up on that, how does the REITs investment community actually look at extended stay versus maybe other types of product? Is there any difference? You know,
they're just getting to understand it now. I think it's attractive to them. You have Jeff Fisher, who was once with Innkeepers in a prior life, you know, almost exclusively extended stay, and now in Chatham doing about the same. You know, I think there's increasing appreciation in the broader investment community for select service product, which historically, you know, wasn't nearly as attractive to them. But in an environment like the environment we have now, they're viewing it the same way our traditional investors viewed it, and your investors as well, as a more stable, higher margin business model with a tremendous amount of appeal. And if you look at the quality of the assets, how that's changed over the past several years, the assets are much more what they would term institutional quality in terms of construction than they were at one point. And you know, we find, if you look at the way public companies trade now, there used to be a large distinction between the multiples that high-quality, full-service hotel REITs could get versus select service REITs, and that's not the case anymore. In fact, some of the highest and best trading companies own nearly exclusively select service and extended stay assets.
Like Apple.
By the way, does anyone in the audience own a extended stay property? Oh, good, okay. So we didn't do this all for naught. That's good. All right. Let's jump into some soft brands, shall we? That's our next slide. Yep. It's obviously a trending topic, interesting topic. I know you have multiple soft brands now.
We do.
Bruce, you want to just jump on this slide real quick and then we'll...
Yeah, so really what we're trying to explain here is the size of the existing supply is in blue for several, we got put 4 brands up here, kind of the 4 leaders, I guess, soft brand, if you will. Ascend is a choice brand, Curio, Hilton, Autograph, with Marriott, Tribute with Marriott, and then we've put the 2 newest ones that have come along, the Hyatt and Hyatt brand and the Tapestry collection. And really what we're trying to say here is that if you were to, I think, ask Liam, he would probably say, we did never expect that there would be this many new construction Autograph hotels. And that is absolutely the case really across soft brands. The expectation when they started the brand was, well, there's a number of independents that will want to convert because they'd like to be in our reservation system, and we'll be able to offer, you know, a less stringent renovation PIP program to these owners and keep it more local and more contextual to the city that it's in. But in fact, developers have been interested in building those, and I think some of that's a result of where we are in the cycle and the fact that money was pretty available. But we have Autograph got a great example of really a modern hotel in the Seaport in Boston with the Envoy, one of my favorite properties. Kind of a unique thing, okay? But we're seeing a lot more new construction on the soft brand side than I think anticipated is really kind of the message of the slide.
And it's sold for a record. Yeah, a record.
Who wants to give like a great definition? What is a soft brand? Liam, how do you define it?
Wow, that's a very good question. A soft brand is it has a character of its own. It speaks to a particular guest. It is unique to that particular market, that location, and has a compelling story that it can articulate. And then it's plugged into the brand architecture in terms of Marriott.com and the 1-800 number and all that sort of good stuff.
I call it like the Uncola brand.
Uncola.
Uncola, you know.
I like it.
There you go.
Uncola.
You can use that. What do you say is the future of soft branding? I mean, it seems like it's kind of on this trajectory that just keeps going up and up. That
well, it is.
I
think there's more choices, more abilities to meet those consumer needs. And perhaps, there's a great example. We had a Marriott in Annapolis that struggled as a Marriott just by virtue of the type of customer that was going there, was perennially from a challenge from a brand equity perspective. And we converted it to an Autograph, put its own nautical theme, Annapolis theme in there. And the hotel is doing unbelievably well from a guest satisfaction perspective, a rate and a RevPAR perspective. I think there's some great opportunities to put where you put the right brand on a building and create a great story around what that individual brand, that individual Autograph hotel speaks to, and you can have great success, compelling success.
Yeah.
And I think there's a great story around it. Otherwise, why are people doing them, right? I mean,
can they command a price premium over hard brands, soft brands? Are you saying?
You know, just to piggyback off what Liam said really quick, I'm sorry to, but
No,
you know, the soft brands, what they provide is the backstory. And people want to Facebook their stay, Instagram their stay, Snapchat their stay. Well, they're not going to Snapchat a Courtyard or Hampton Inn or something like that. You know, so they want people to know where they're staying.
Yeah.
And so I think these unique brands like Autograph and things, they give the consumer the ability to still get their Marriott Rewards points and miles, but have an authentic curated stay that has some kind of authentic features and a story behind it they can kind of go and tell their friends about later on. So.
Justin, you're not invested in the space yet, right?
We're not invested in the space.
Okay, but what do you think of it from the overall investor kind of sentiment toward it?
Well, investor sentiment at the high end is very strong. So, you know, you look at companies like Pebblebrook and others and LaSalle that have kind of focused around boutique type product, you know, whether affiliated or not affiliated with a
Or
brand.
even Kessler with
Or
Xenia.
Kessler with, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so that there have been very successful people at the high end there. I think what remains to be proven is how broad the market is for that type of product. And you know, the beauty of the brands that we're invested in now is that they've been recession tested, and we know how they perform in a variety of economic environments. And while I think the soft brands are doing incredibly well now and have potential to do very well in the future, right. They have yet to be tested in the same way that some of the other brands that we participate have been. And you know, for us, our investment model tends to be very conservative and focused around a thesis that's been proven, you know, through multiple cycles. I think you would see us as an investor being a slower mover towards something like that.
Mm-hmm. What do you say then to you know, the whole idea about soft brands is that they might come encumbered with less brand standards that a hard brand might come with, but yet they're paying the same relative fee, right, as a hard brand versus a soft brand. So what do you say to the franchisee who owns one of your hard brands and they see a independent soft brand out there and they're like, oh, they're paying the same fee as me, but they have to come with such the stringent standards that might come with a Marriott hard brand?
Yeah, I think there's I think they do have stringent standards, right? You have to be able to produce a brand story that's compelling, that speaks to the decor, how everything is executed against, and at a quality that should be commensurate with the tier that it's in, which is you know, a premium lodging experience. So it is not as if these things are cheap to do, and then and that there are no standards around them. Mm-hmm. The standards have to be defined in terms of what does the execution look like at a property level. And I think, you know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Money goes where it's well taken care of. If you have a value proposition that works for an owner that says, I'm going to put an autograph on there and pay you 5 or 5.5% in royalty fees, well, it either works or it doesn't work. And I think you would find that we're going to open an autograph, a new autograph every 21 days for the next 12 or 14 months or so. And I think that speaks to itself. Yeah.
I mean, you have, well, 2 real soft brands. I guess Luxury Collection would also
Luxury
be.
Collection.
So you have 3.
And there's some fabulous hotels. And I mean, you walk those hotels. I mean, there is a level of detail and execution that is just beyond belief in terms of what they want to deliver. I mean, it's called luxury for a reason. Yeah. It should be a luxury experience. The product that is delivered, the service that is delivered has to be a luxury experience.
But it's amazing that soft brands are kind of a newer idea, and then companies such as Hilton, such as Marriott, already have 3 separate soft brands in their portfolio.
Well, I don't know if it's a new idea, in that if you look across at that independent space, I think across all the whole business in the United States is about $30 billion in revenue. Now that runs the gamut of the independent hotel that's small and you know, 30, 40 to the Broadmoor, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of iconic, beautiful, luxury hotels out there that I think from an economic perspective, if we, Marriott, have an ability to provide a compelling rationale for them that speaks to, I mean, you got places like, well, not to mention, but big independent hotels, iconic hotels, they're probably spending $20 per res call on their 1-800 line. We do it for $4.82. You know, res cost. OTAs, they're probably paying OTAs 20-25%. Ours is a blended cost of around 11.5-12%. So there's a value proposition that the brands can bring, be it ourselves or Hilton, and indeed Starwood with the luxury collection, that either makes sense for people or doesn't.
So there's runway here for this for soft branding.
Well, yeah, and I think putting the word soft brand together with boutique, I think, is probably coming, and more packaging of that, which I think will lead to more towards a tiering. Hilton was very specific when they launched Tapestry, and they said it will be positioned below Curio. And so I think there's more expansion available there. We're going to test the boundaries of how far soft branding can go down the chain scales, if you will, and I think we'll see some dynamics of that occur as the market shifts over the next 3 to 4 years. No question.
All right, let's move our last topic. Oh, we have a question.
Actually, that is a conversion, and it has not yet begun. Yeah. There will be more. It's only been 2 months. As Hilton said, it takes 90 to 120 days to process a lot of these applications that they announced when they launched the brand in January. I put it up there because most people's perception would be is there would be more, but I would expect when we put our quarterly report out in the next couple of weeks that the number will jump pretty substantially.
So our last topic is full service. We have one more slide. Bruce, if you want to run through this real quick.
Sure. So full service is loosely put together as upscale, upper upscale, and luxury. The reason we put together upscale into full service is because at the Hilton Garden Inn or the Courtyard, you're not going to, as a resident of that town, you're not going to go to the Courtyard for dinner, but you can get that quick serve opportunity to eat if you need it. They have the bar business, obviously, similarly, okay, but it's lighter food and beverage service. So the full service market today has the largest pipeline we've ever seen, okay, even if you separated upscale from the discussion and said luxury and upper upscale, there is a very vast pipeline. There's also more brands up there than there's ever been before, too. What we have seen is a little bit of a resurgence in looking at doing some of these, call them smaller format, upper upscale, kind of trying to do a 200-room Hilton or a 210-room Marriott, rather than, oh, it's got to be 400 or 500 or 600 rooms. So that smaller platform has brought back some of the development of those types of properties, and we have, of course, seen them in urban centers, but also the activity with a lot of these brands today is market 26 through 60, where it's kind of where there wasn't a fine full-service hotel in that town, or it was maybe undersupplied at the full-service level. Also, these hotels are following convention center developments and stadium developments around the country, as many of those are happening. And as for instance, there's 5 full-service hotels going up around the new baseball stadium in Atlanta, to give you an example. So this continues to be a market that is expanding, and obviously this is where all the soft brands are. We don't yet have a soft brand that's, quote, select service or limited service, so many of them are full service. So again, in discussing that, you're kind of grouping that stuff together. But, you know, full service dynamics continue to see, you know, more leased restaurant space, putting, as they did here at the Hyatt, putting a Ruth Chris in there as the primary restaurant versus running that yourselves and creating that environment, which is going to become more and more and more common here in America.
So here's one prominent CEO, not Arnie, said this, but on one of their quarterly calls, that development of the full-service suburban hotel is dead as we know it. Do you agree with that? Is it?
No, it's not dead. I mean, I think, you know, back to Bruce's point about the age of the 450-room suburban Marriott or a suburban Hilton with the big ballroom and all that sort of stuff and multiple food and beverage outlets, I think those things don't make a whole lot of sense in most markets. But there is certainly, I mean, from a guest perspective, there is and back to that customer demographic, there is a desire, want, need for a full service type experience. But that means you have to be very careful about how you structure it, number of rooms, the outlets, back to the F&B, in order to make it, to be able to deliver from an economic perspective and also to be able to deliver that total guest experience. Mm-hmm. But not, I mean, we're not going to see them to the same volume, obviously, that you see limited service hotels.
So where are we seeing? Are they fit for urban spaces as opposed to these kind of suburban?
If you look at the amount of development, back to the list that you just gave, Bruce, I mean, a lot of urban, and that kind of, I don't know if there's such a thing as semi-urban, but more kind of lifestyleish type suburb. If you think about the some of the
High-density suburban.
high density suburban, some of the mixed use developments that say some of our friends like Mark Laporte have done in Raleigh, where it's not downtown, but it's out in that, you know, where you have everything is all live, work, eat, and all that sort of good stuff. And back to the sports, and often that some of that is incentive money as well too. So sometimes there are what might be characterized as unusual structuring of projects to get them done from a city perspective.
Well, I was going to say, can you do them nowadays without some kind of, you know, local inducement or?
A lot of them have those local inducements, but there's a significant portion that stand on their own too.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that Bruce included Courtyard and Hilton Garden Inn in his full service definition.
I thought the same thing.
And I think that's indicative of what I said earlier. I mean, if you look at what's happened to suburban full service hotels, they're made in many instances obsolete by Courtyards and Hilton Garden Inns that are you know, have blown out or extended meeting space, but operate significantly more efficiently. And there may be markets, high-priced markets, where a full-service Marriott or a small full-service Hilton can compete in the same way. But I think those markets are a small fraction of the total suburban markets there, and much more often you're going to see a Courtyard with extra meeting space that's not entirely prototypical, but with a much more efficient operating model, able to provide value to the customers in that market in a way that a full-service Marriott couldn't, or, you know, a Hilton Garden Inn, which has an incredibly robust, you know, F&B outlet or capacity based on the specs for the kitchen in those hotels, you know, with extra meeting space that's serving the needs that were once served by a full-service Hilton.
Well, Bruce, I think you even said that you're contemplating separating it out into its own category, like...
Yeah, absolutely. I think upscale on its own, there are some brands in there that have a significant amount of restaurant, and there are some that don't. And so I see a stratification of that in the near term. But also, the other upscale format that's really working is at the airport. I think the population of 15 to 25 person meetings, and even less than that, where a Courtyard can service that, or Hilton Garden Inn can service that, in business travel, that's a big deal, because less people are reporting to corporate offices these days, but they need to get together. So you're going to put 3 or 4 people who need a meeting room in a hotel, they're going to go out to eat anyway. That is a perfect platform for upscale, and I think that that's where it's a segment killer for the big suburban full-service hotel, because you can do it at the upscale property for maybe half the price.
And the product is excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're kind of at the end of the road now. Any questions in the audience before I ask these guys one last question? Here's my last question for you guys. Ready? What keeps you up at night, but what gets you out of bed in the morning? That's my question for you. Bruce, you start.
Donald Trump keeps me up at night, and gets me out of bed is trying to figure out a way to keep the hotel industry going every day. And you know, we participate in a lot of different aspects of the industry, but it's a life passion. I grew up doing it, and so it definitely gets me out of bed every day.
There's not a lot that keeps me up at night right now, other than
a
little insomnia. It's certainly not work-related. So, you know, I mentioned earlier, we built a portfolio to be stable and around a segment of the business, which we have a tremendous amount of confidence in and have lived with through multiple cycles. So, you know, in terms of the select service segment and the brands, Hilton and Marriott, that we're affiliated with, we have a high degree of confidence. We have almost no debt. We have very low debt. So there's very little business related that keeps me up at night. I have a son getting married here shortly, you know, that causes a little loss of sleep, but I'm sure it will be perfect. But, you know, what gets me up every morning is, you know, I'm fortunate enough to work with an incredibly talented and fun group of people, and in an industry that's incredibly exciting. You know, I grew up in real estate, spent a tremendous amount of time in multifamily, which is a very fun business, but hospitality is an amazing business, and to be able to interact as friends with competitors in the space, and to get to know all of the fun personalities and characters that exist within this business. I think, you know, every day is a new adventure, and that gets me up in the morning.
Al?
So what keeps me up at night? Again, you know, we're primarily in the select service space in major metro markets, so not a lot keeps me up at night work related. I do have a teenage daughter who keeps me up at night very often. But the one in the black right there.
Oh, stand up, come on.
You know, I really enjoy, like, similar to what Justin said, you know, I enjoy the partners that I work with. We're a family business. You know, my dad comes into the office every day. I've got brothers that are in the office every day. I enjoy my partners. We're great friends. We spend time out of work, in work together. So, you know, I've been in this business since I was 5 years old. Don't know a whole lot of anything else besides the hotel and motel business. So, very happy, you know, to get up and go to work every day and interact with the people in my company.
Last but not least.
Well, I mean, there's nothing more I can add to that. I mean, you could worry about geopolitical stuff and everything, but you can't really change it. So I really don't. I try not to worry about stuff or have stuff keep me awake at night. But what gets me out of bed in the morning is the exact same thing that that these three gentlemen said. This is a great business. It's a great bunch of people to work with, whether it be owners, franchisees, even our competitors. I think we have a unique industry in that we can sit down and have conversations and break bread with people who you're competing with at various levels. But it's a great business. And like Al, I've been in this business maybe not since I was 5, but certainly since I was 14. There must be something very attractive about it that gets me out of bed every morning, and there is. It's a great business.
Very good. Well, with that, thank you all and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.